Shalom, guys. Welcome back to another episode here. Just Share Your Ministry with Casa de Israel Yarah. Thank you for being there. Like I always say, if you like the content that we have on our channel, like and subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, put it on the comment section down below. So, today we're going to continue with the weekly Torah portions. This week, we are in the portion of Miketz, right? This is the story of Joseph. And Joseph now is in Egypt. He is in the house of Potiphar. He is basically accused by Potiphar's wife after being put, in command, in a responsible position of Potiphar's house, and his wife entices him. He basically does the right thing, but for doing the right thing, she accuses him of taking advantage of her, and he goes to prison. Right, in prison, he is held there, and he becomes, second in command in the prison. He interprets two dreams from the, if I'm not mistaken, the bread maker and the cupbearer. And in that environment, we see through the course of Joseph's life and trajectory now is he goes from being the favored son because, again, he does the right thing. He has a gift of interpreting dreams, in a way, having communication with the divine or with Elohim in a way. And now he is in this situation where he is sold, betrayed by his family, betrayed by Pharaoh's wife, and now his hope, in a way, is put in the hands of Adonai and the cupbearer remembering Joseph. Okay, and so in this scenario, Joseph is about to go in front of Pharaoh, and what we know about Joseph is that God is with him. And this is one of my favorite, I think, stories in the Bible, because it highlights in one of the most extreme, crucial, stressful, emotional moments of an individual who is embodying and representing what we are called to be, right? The carriers of the promise, the standard, the expectation is on Joseph, and he is basically going through hardship after hardship because he's good. He's, I guess, doing his best and doing the right thing. And because of that, he is betrayed, but what was not recognized and appreciated in his home, it will be exalted in not such a home. Okay, so let's get to the portion. All right, so like I said, this week's portion is Miketz. It is in Genesis chapter 41, verses 1 to Genesis chapter 44, verse 17. The Haftarah, the prophet's portion, is 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 15 to chapter 4, verse 1. And the Brit Hadashah, New Testament portion, is Matthew chapter 27, verses 15 through 46. Now, Torah portion for Hanukkah this week is Miketz, right? We're in the, as I record, this is the 8th day, the last day of Hanukkah. Joseph successfully interpreted Pharaoh's dreams and quickly rose to political power in Egypt. Okay. Today we're not going to read in Hebrew. My apologies. But before we get started, let's do the Torah blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Baruch Adonai Haorah Leolam Ba'ed Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Bless Adonai who's blessed, bless Adonai who's blessed now and forever. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who has chosen us from among the peoples and given us the Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen. So this week starts like this. Chapter 41, right? Starts in verse 1, but we're going to read from 9 on, right? So remember, Pharaoh opens the chapter with a dream, okay? And he tells the dream. He has interpreters, advisors, and different types of people, right? Magicians and all this, and they cannot interpret Pharaoh's dream, right? And so all this power, all this understanding, and they cannot understand what Pharaoh is going through his sleep, his dreams. And remember, these are people that thought that had control of the divine, right? And had an understanding of it. They believed that God and the gods cannot interpret the dreams, right? The only ones that could interpret the dreams were the magicians and the visors of Pharaoh, right? Those people that were surrounding him. And so in this case, Pharaoh was in need of understanding what was going on, and nobody that he had under him, under his power, could interpret the dream except Joseph. Okay, so after Pharaoh talks about his dream, cupbearer remembers Joseph, and this is where we are. It says, finally, the king's cupbearer spoke up. Today I have been reminded of my failure. He told Pharaoh, some time ago you were angry with the chief baker and me, and you imprisoned us in the palace of the captain of the guard. One night the chief baker and I each had a dream, and each dream had its own meaning. There was a young Hebrew man with us in the prison who was a slave of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he told us what each of our dreams meant. And everything happened just as he had predicted. I was restored to my position as a cupbearer, and the chief baker was executed and impaled on a pole. Pharaoh sent for Joseph at once. He was quickly brought from the prison. After he shaved and changed his clothes, he went in and stood before Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream last night, and no one here can tell me what it means. But I have heard that when you hear about a dream, you can interpret it. It is beyond my power to do this, Joseph replied. But God can tell you what it means and set you at ease. And so, this is something that I've highlighted previously, how, remember, their perspective is that God does not interpret the dreams, they do, right? And Joseph, in this extreme necessity of Pharaoh, says, I cannot interpret, God can, right? So this is revolutionary in this case, because now Pharaoh, in his mind, he is God, right? He is the son of God, the son of the son, God, and he is, the epitome and the image in Egypt, right? And he cannot interpret the dream. He doesn't understand the dream, and he doesn't have nobody in his kingdom that can interpret the dream. But this Hebrew, a slave, right, prisoner, is the only one that can interpret it, and he gives all the authority and all the attribute of the interpretation of this dream to God, right? Which is beautiful, right? Is a turn of authority and hierarchy that penetrates to who Joseph is, okay? And so it continues. After Joseph interprets the dream, because of God's gift and ability that has blessed him with, Joseph then says, Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh, right? So Joseph says, you should establish somebody with authority, with knowledge and understanding of certain elements and officials to help. And Pharaoh was like, great idea. So Pharaoh asks his officials, can we find anyone else like this man, so obviously filled with the Spirit of God? Such a powerful statement. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has revealed the meaning of this dream to you, clearly no one else is intelligent or wise as you are. And remember, Pharaoh attributes wisdom and intelligence to Joseph. But remember, Joseph established that the wisdom and the intelligence came from God. You will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than yours. Right? So now, Pharaoh unconsciously is putting Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, in authority. Because remember, Joseph is clear. He is not the one that has the power, the wisdom, the intelligence, the ability. It's God. So now this image of God, this representation of God, is in the presence of Pharaoh in the nations, the most powerful authority in mankind in this case. And here, this Pharaoh has to give the power to this man who gives all the authority and the recognition to God. I'm excited because it's such a beautiful representation of our faith. And it says, I hereby putting you in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh removed the signet ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's finger. He dressed them in fine linen and clothing and hung a gold chain around his neck. Then he had Joseph ride in the chariot reserved for his second in command. And wherever Joseph went, the command was shouted, kneel down. So Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of all Egypt. And Pharaoh said to him, I am Pharaoh, but no one will lift a hand or foot in the entire land of Egypt without your approval. Beautiful, right? Because remember, God is the one that is doing this, because Joseph already humbled himself in recognition of the deity, right? He already established that no matter what Pharaoh decided, the only one that was going to be able to give him the answer to everything was God. And once he received that, he said, God chose you and God is speaking through you, so you're second in command, right? You are my image, right? So Joseph becomes the image of God, Yoreh, and the image of Pharaoh. But Pharaoh is clear. Without Joseph, there's no salvation. Without God, there's no salvation. Okay? So, let's continue. Pharaoh's initial appointment gives Joseph authority in the palace based on recognition of the Spirit of God in Joseph. The combination of insight, indicated by the dream interpretation, and wisdom, indicated by the proposed strategy, were sufficient to conclude that Joseph enjoyed divine favor, a good reason to keep him close to the throne. And remember, this is one of the most beautiful parts of the Bible that says that God promises this, right? That you have favor in God's eyes and in men's eyes. And the beginning of all wisdom is fear of God. And Joseph expressed that, not of trembling, but of fear, of reverence and recognition of his inability and ability with God. Okay? In Egyptian documents, the administrative second in command over Egypt is the vizier. That's what I was trying to say this whole time. Now, as the overseer of the royal estates, Joseph's new role, however, may not be quite as lofty, right, as it might be understood maybe. But there are other posts that could make the claim of being second in command in the area of their responsibility. This is similar to the company today that has presidents, vice presidents of production, vice presidents of marketing, vice presidents of legal, and etc. Each of these individuals could legitimately claim to be second in command in his or her particular area, and to be set in charge of the entire company in the area of his or his jurisdiction. Now, these are, of course, historical established points, but the Bible establishes that he was second, and the image of Pharaoh was upon and reflected through Joseph. In this famine, in this crucial time, the only one that can sustain the kingdom of Egypt and the nations was Joseph. Okay, now we're gonna go, and today's gonna be short because I just want you guys to understand this point, right? Because this is a very controversial point in all our religious movements and groups and everything that we create to identify ourselves, and is the recognition of the hierarchy and authority and the complicated expression of who our representative is and what does he embody, right? We're talking about Yeshua, right? Jesus. And we get so focused on the external, right? Pharaoh starts to dress Joseph in authority, right? He gives him the shaving first to be his presence. He gives him the insignia. He gives him the clothing, right? He puts him in the chariot, and all these visuals describe the representation, right? But before we saw Joseph, or we met Joseph in the insignia ring and the dressed, shaved in the presence of Pharaoh, we saw the Joseph that was doing the right thing in his father's house, who carried his father's values through this whole journey, no matter what he went through, betrayals from his brothers, his uncles, right? The Ishmaelites tell them to the Egyptians. And so the Pharaoh's the Potiphar's wife betrays him and lies when he does the right thing again. And so this whole time Joseph is going through this process of betrayal and test and tribulation, but he stays true to his core, what his father's promise taught him, the God of his fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And because of that fear and that recognition of the hierarchy and the wisdom that brings, right? Because that's what Pharaoh recognized from Joseph, the divine favor and the wisdom that Joseph, in the beginning of his introduction in Pharaoh's eyes, established that whatever Pharaoh needed came from God. Okay, so now Yeshua is going to teach us why. It says Matthew 7:15-20, be aware of false prophets who come in disguise as harmless sheep, but are really vicious wolves. You can identify them by their fruits, that is, by the way they act. Can you pick grapes from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? A good tree produces good fruit, and a bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can produce good fruit. So every tree that does not produce good fruit is chopped off and thrown into fire. Yes, just as you can identify a tree by its fruit, you can identify people by their actions. And this is the whole story of Joseph, right? We can justify ourselves in interpreting Joseph as a negative character in this situation, or in situations of his age, because he was younger and he was naive. But in reality, Joseph is doing the right thing, as we have been establishing. So Joseph is just doing God's will, and men have reflected their fruits, right? His brothers reflected their fruits. Pharaoh's wife, Potiphar's wife reflected her fruits. The cupbearer, to an extent, almost forgot about him, but reflected his fruits. And now we're comparing all these negative representations to Joseph, who has been standing faithfully in obedience to his teaching given to him from his father Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And now he's carrying this promise, and all he's doing is keeping the recognition of the authority, the hierarchy. Yod He Vav He. Hey, I hear you can interpret dreams. I cannot, but God can. That verse is so important to describe what we need and require. It's not about us. It's about Him. It's about what can we do to get out the way and do His will. Okay? And so, continue. So we gotta bear good fruit. That's what Messiah said. Why do I highlight this? Because it's interesting that in Joseph's blessing from his father, later on it says Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring whose branches climb over a wall. With bitterness, archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility, but his bow remained steady. His strong arm stayed limber because of his hand of the mighty one of Jacob. because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, because of your father's God, who helps you because of the Almighty, who blesses you with blessings of the sky above, blessings of the deep springs below, blessings of the breast of the womb, your blessings of the ancient mountains, then the mounting bounty of the age-old hills. Let us all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. And this is key, because this is what embodies Joseph. Understanding that in his journey, what dictated his wisdom, his might, his divine favor was his humility, okay? His willingness to represent that which characterized his deity, obedience. And so there's a very interesting interpretation of Yeshua, right? Jesus, they say that he calls himself the shepherd, right? That comes to get his sheep, right? And so they identify Jesus with the great shepherd, right? That they say that Jesus is God, Jesus is the Father, and he is all these things. And we get distracted by the wardrobe of authority that God has given him, right? We get distracted with Jesus in the chariot, with the insignia, with the clothes of the second in command that make him the image of God. And we forget that God appointed him for a reason, right? And Ezekiel, right, you can read Ezekiel 34. We're gonna read it, right? We're gonna read the most important part of Ezekiel 34 that everybody forgets to read. And Ezekiel 34 is talking about the great shepherd, how he's gonna come, he's gonna deliver, he's gonna judge, he's gonna separate, and put everything in its place. But it says here, I will place over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he will tend them. He will tend them and be their shepherd. I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince among them. I, the Lord, have spoken. And you have to pay attention to the wording, because it's exactly what it says here about Joseph. But his bow remained steady, his strong arm stayed limber, because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, because your father's God, who helps you, because of the Almighty, who blesses you with blessings and blessings. Humility and understanding are inability to understand the divine without God. The inability to understand the word without the spirit, without faith. Joseph was clear. That's why he is given so much authority. He's given so much power. He's given so much recognition. Not because he overpowered, not because he overestablished himself, because he claimed his inheritance, because he claimed his name and his status. He just did what he had to do. And he went through what he had to go through and stayed true to who he was and kept his faith on God. And because of that humility, that consistency, God established him as second in command in Egypt. And you might say, well, why would God put him second in command in Egypt? Because you saw how Pharaoh had to recognize God's divine power in Joseph. And guess what? Even though Pharaoh saw Joseph recognized God. So many people are going to see you. Everybody saw Yeshua. And because they saw Yeshua, they said that he's the Father. And that's the right approach, right? Because that's the goal, right? For us to see the Father in our Messiah. But we can't forget that the Father sent our Messiah. And that our loyalty stands with our Messiah because his loyalty is with his Father. And our honor is given to us from the Father through our Messiah. Joseph gave his brothers salvation because he was willing to be used. Not because he was willing to establish his wisdom and understanding, because he was willing to be used. Because he knew that it wasn't him, it was the Father. So, I hope that was good. It makes sense. If you learned something new, Baruch Hashem. If you didn't, I'm sorry. I did my best. I just know what I know, and that's what I teach. I hope you guys have a wonderful closing of Hanukkah. I'm pretty sure you're going to see this Saturday or Friday, which will be not Hanukkah. So, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Shavuot Tov and Shabbat Shalom.